4 years ago, Sienna Vale stood at the edge of a hospital bed, tears streaking down her face as she cradled a baby girl who should never have existed. A baby born from a mistake, or perhaps fate itself. That night, outside her window, hidden behind the trees, was a man in a black coat, silent, watching, unmoving. Cassian Lorcan, the same man who once told her she'd never be enough. The same man who tried to erase her from his life, and then claimed ownership of the life growing inside her. He said she'd stolen from him, but he was the one who took everything. And yet, on this night, he watched as she became a mother. He didn't knock, didn't speak, just watched. 3 years later, that same man stood in a vineyard at sunset, watching again. This time he watched her walk down the aisle in white lace and tears. But the man waiting at the altar wasn't him. It was Nico Thorne, Cassian's former best friend, a trauma surgeon, a man who'd once walked away from the billion-dollar world Cassian ruled. And now, the man who stood beside Sienna not as her owner, but her partner. She had once begged Cassian to love her enough to choose her. Now, she had someone who did, every single day. When the officiant said, "If anyone objects to this union, speak now," the vineyard held its breath, and Sienna turned, right to where Cassian stood. Their eyes locked. The man who had once controlled her with contracts, threats, and silence was now the outsider. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Cassian didn't speak either, because he knew. He had loved her with conditions. Nico had loved her without them. After the vows, while guests clapped and the sun dipped below Lake Michigan, Cassian quietly turned to leave. But before he disappeared into the trees, Sienna slipped something into his palm. A small, white envelope. Inside was a single photo. A little girl with soft curls and ocean eyes, his eyes. On the back of the photo in Sienna's handwriting were 7 words. "She has your eyes, but not your heart." And underneath it, one more sentence, short but true. Nico taught her how to love. She didn't look back, because this time there was nothing to go back to. Only the future, the family she chose, the love she earned, and the man who stayed. But before we begin, if you believe real love is about the one who chooses you every day, not the one who regrets losing you, then please give this video a like. And don't leave without dropping your thoughts in the comments section to help others find this story. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Love and Twilight. It means everything to us. We had to shorten this story a bit so we could get straight to the point. No fluff, no dragging scenes, just the real, raw truth. And now, let's begin. Sienna Vale hadn't cried in 6 months. Not since the day she packed her life into 4 boxes and left the loft she once shared with the man who said he loved her, then walked away when she needed him most. But today, as she sat alone in the cold silver and white lobby of the Manhattan Fertility Institute, her eyes burned. Not from grief, not from regret, but from something more powerful, resolve. She was 28, and done waiting. She no longer wanted a man's approval, affection, or apology. She wasn't looking to prove her worth to anyone, especially not to the man who vanished the moment she whispered the words, "I want a family." Now, all she wanted was a child. Her child. Not a ring, not a house, not a fairy tale, just someone to love, someone to raise, someone who was hers. The receptionist's voice pulled her out of her thoughts. "Ms. Val." Sienna stood, smoothing the navy wrap dress over her thighs. Her heels clicked against the tile as she followed a nurse into a narrow hallway lined with frosted glass doors. She didn't hesitate. She didn't flinch. She'd already done the research, chosen the profile, made the payments. All that remained was the procedure. Profile 714, B, art professor, green eyes, loves the cello, calm, grounded, emotionally intelligent. His donor file read like poetry compared to the men she used to date. In the consultation room, she glanced at the empty examination chair, her heart pacing, not racing. She pressed a hand gently over her abdomen. "My body, my choice, my child." The nurse returned with a tablet for her to sign. "You're sure you don't want to review the donor profile again?" "No need. I already know what I want." Truth was, she'd spent weeks agonizing over it. The future father of her child, even if he never knew it, deserved careful consideration. She wasn't reckless. She was ready. But somewhere, in another wing of the clinic, a quiet error was waiting to be made. Her best friend Layla, the only one who knew about her plan, worked late nights in the lab. It was supposed to be a favor, a silent, discreet shortcut, but that shortcut came with a cost no one could predict. And tonight, Layla retrieved the wrong vial. Layla had worked in the lab for 5 years. She knew the protocols like the back of her hand. Sterile gloves, barcode scanners, sealed containment. It was supposed to be simple, but that night, a system glitch rerouted several profiles into a secondary holding unit. One of them wasn't supposed to be there. Z09. Top security clearance. Marked confidential. Stored in a vault within a vault. No open access. No donor name. Just a letter and numbers. Z09 wasn't meant for public selection. He didn't appear on digital lists. His genetic profile was protected for legal and legacy reasons. Only executives with high-level clearance had access to that vault. But tonight, somehow, the label had been printed again. And somehow, the vault had been opened. It was late, after hours. Layla was exhausted, running on vending machine coffee and a loyalty to her friend. Sienna had begged her to help. Just one vial. Discreetly prepared. No judgment. No risk. She'd agreed, because she trusted the system. The numbers matched the order, but the label was wrong. Without realizing it, Layla prepped the wrong sample, sealed it, and placed it in the nitrogen tank to be delivered upstairs. That one action, quick, silent, and seemingly harmless, rewrote everything. By the time Sienna arrived, lying back under bright lights and sterile air, the error had already been made. The procedure was quick, clinical, unemotional, but in Sienna's heart, it meant the beginning of everything she had dared to hope for. She walked out of the clinic that night feeling free. She had no idea that she wasn't carrying Profile 714B's child. She was carrying the DNA of the man who had once held her heart in his hands and crushed it. Cassian Lorcan, the billionaire CEO who disappeared the day she told him she wanted children. For the next few weeks, Sienna's world softened. Morning sickness greeted her like a secret handshake, unpleasant but welcome. The faint nausea, the sore chest, the sudden cravings for peach yogurt at 2 a.m., it all made her feel alive again. Made her feel like this choice had purpose. She kept the pregnancy quiet. Not even her mother knew. Only Layla, who beamed every time they texted about vitamins and baby books. Then came the first ultrasound. 2 heartbeats. Twins. Sienna laughed through her tears, hand trembling as she clutched the blurry printout. "I'm really doing this," she whispered. "We're really doing this." She placed the picture on her nightstand and stared at it every morning. 2 little shapes. 2 tiny promises. A future she had built with her own hands. And yet, across the city, in a corner office wrapped in floor-to-ceiling glass, Cassian Lorcan stared at a security report from his company's private genetics wing. Someone had accessed Profile Z09. Someone without authorization. Someone who signed out his file, his DNA, without permission. And it was used. The audit logs didn't lie. Cassian's face hardened. He didn't speak. He simply turned to his assistant and said, "Get my car." By the time Sienna returned for her second scan, she didn't notice the sleek black SUV parked across the street. Didn't see the man inside it, fists clenched, eyes locked on the clinic doors. She walked in with hope, but fate had already shifted course. Her new beginning had just collided with her past, and the man she thought she'd never see again was already on his way to reclaim something he didn't even know he had lost. The receptionist at the front desk barely had time to speak before the door flung open with a force that made the windows rattle. He entered like a loaded gun, tall, sharp, unreadable, Cassian Lorcan, 6'5", black suit tailored to precision, and a face so composed it made silence feel like a threat. Behind him trailed 2 security officers in plain clothes, silent, alert. "Where is she?" he said coldly. The receptionist froze. "Sir, I'm going to have to..." He tossed a folder on the counter. "Your clinic made a mistake, a very expensive one, and I'm here to fix it." By the time the director arrived, Cassian had already accessed the surveillance logs, presented legal clearance, and made one thing absolutely clear: he wasn't here for conversation. He was here for control. Inside the exam room, Sienna was adjusting her coat, preparing to leave, when the door opened and everything stopped. There he was, the man she had tried to forget, the man who had once held her heart and shattered it. Cassian. Her voice caught in her throat. "Cassian?" He didn't respond. just walked in and placed the folder on the counter. She opened it. Inside were printouts, security logs, time-stamped footage, biological match data, everything. My sperm, he said quietly, was never part of your plan, but now it's in your body. That child, he pointed to her stomach, is mine. Her pulse surged. This wasn't intentional. I didn't know. Layla didn't know. I don't care what you thought you were doing. What matters is what you've done. I wanted a baby, not this. He stepped closer, voice low. You didn't just take a child, Sienna. You took my bloodline. You're carrying something that belongs to me. I didn't take anything. Oh, but you did. His eyes narrowed. And now we deal with it my way. Sienna's breath trembled, but she held his gaze. Cassian, you walked away. You didn't want children. You made that clear. I wanted control, he said flatly. Not chaos, not public scandal, and certainly not this. It was a mistake, she said. I didn't know it was your... He cut her off with a glare. You expect me to believe this is just a coincidence? That out of hundreds of profiles you happen to get mine? I chose profile 714B. Art professor. It was an accident, I swear. His voice dropped to a whisper. Accidents don't carry my genetic markers. Accidents don't threaten billion-dollar bloodlines. She took a step back. What do you want from me? You'll move into my estate. Today. Her chest tightened. What? You'll be monitored by private physicians. You'll eat what they prescribe, rest when they say. No travel, no contact with outsiders. You'll carry the child safely, deliver it, and then disappear. And if I say no? He stepped even closer. Layla is already under arrest. Sienna blinked. No. That's not. I have the footage. She accessed the vault. She printed the label. And she broke protocol. Please. She was just trying to help me. She didn't know. I don't care. His voice was stone. She's facing 10 years. Unless you cooperate. Tears welled in her eyes. Don't do this. I'm not negotiating, Sienna. I'm offering you a chance to save your friend. She froze. Her world began to tilt. Her pulse thundered in her ears. This wasn't the man she once loved. This was someone else. Colder, harder, unforgiving. Let her go, she said quietly. Cassian didn't move. I'll do what you want, she whispered. Just let her go. He studied her, then nodded once. Then pack your things. Sienna sat in silence as the town car pulled away from the clinic. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't look out the window. Her mind was a storm she couldn't quiet. Layla was safe, for now. But Sienna? She was no longer free. Her phone had been taken. Her contact with the outside world cut. Beside her, a man in a dark suit sat motionless, scrolling through something on his tablet, never once glancing her way. She didn't know his name. Didn't care. All she knew was that he worked for Cassian. Just like the driver. Just like everyone else now surrounding her life. It was nearly midnight when the gates appeared, iron, unmarked, lined with cameras. Beyond them was a winding road, flanked by tall trees, leading to what looked more like a private research facility than a home. Cassian's estate. 50,000 square feet of steel, marble, and silence perched high above the Hudson. As the car came to a stop, the doors opened and she was ushered out. No greeting, no welcome, just instruction. Miss Vale, the same man said. You'll be escorted to your suite. Meals are scheduled. You'll be seen by Dr. Abrams in the morning. You're advised not to leave your designated area without clearance. She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Every step she took down the hall echoed in her bones. The suite was immaculate. White walls, gold fixtures, a closet full of maternity wear with tags still on, a palace built for a prisoner. As she sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded over her stomach, her voice finally broke through the silence. I'm sorry, she whispered to the baby she carried. I never meant for you to come into the world like this. Outside her door, 2 guards stood watch. Inside, Sienna Vale surrendered to the nightmare she never saw coming. Hello, beautiful family. If you are still here with me, please don't forget to like this video. It makes YouTube push this video to more amazing viewers like you. And also, hit the subscribe button below, because what happens next will keep you at the edge of your sit. Now let's continue. Morning came with silence. Not birdsong, not sunlight. Just the quiet hum of a mansion designed to keep its secrets. Sienna stepped out onto the balcony of her suite and took in the view. A cold skyline, endless trees, no neighbors in sight. Cassian's estate wasn't a home. It was a compound, 3 stories, private helipad, biometric gates, armed personnel, medical wing, interior surveillance, and walls so tall they blocked the world out and her in. She turned away from the view and looked inside. The room was beautiful. Polished floors, plush bedding, a rainfall shower the size of her old bedroom, designer clothes arranged by trimester, a medical-grade crib waiting beside the bed. Everything planned, everything prepared. She was an honored guest. In a cage, a knock came at the door. Before she could answer, it opened. Cassian stood in the doorway, shirt pressed, expression unreadable. "You slept," he said. She didn't answer. He stepped inside anyway. "This suite has been designed for your comfort. You'll find everything you need, nutrition schedules, supplements, even a therapist on call." She looked at him. "You built a nursery before I even knew I was pregnant." "I build for contingencies," he replied, "not accidents." She folded her arms. "What do you want me to do, Cassian?" "Thank you." "No," he said coolly. "I want you to understand the responsibility you carry." She held her belly protectively. "You mean your legacy?" "Our child," he corrected. Her jaw clenched. "That's rich, coming from the man who walked away the moment I said I wanted this." He didn't flinch. "What I want now is to make sure this child is born healthy, safely, without scandal. That's the only thing that matters. Not me." "You're the vessel," he said. She blinked, then laughed, bitter and breathless. "Right, of course." Cassian turned to leave. "Breakfast is in 1 hour. You'll join me." Breakfast was served in silence. A table long enough to seat 20. She sat at one end, Cassian at the other. Between them, nothing but fine china, untouched eggs, and 1,000 unsaid words. She didn't eat. He noticed. "You need to consume the full meal," he said without looking up. "It's balanced to meet trimester guidelines." "Balanced for control," she muttered. "I'm not here to argue." "Then what are you here for?" Her voice was quiet but sharp. "To monitor me, to own me." Cassian set down his fork. "Let me be clear, Sienna. You're not a prisoner, but you are under my protection, and that comes with conditions." She leaned back. "Let me guess. Rules?" He nodded. "You will not leave the estate grounds. You'll remain in approved areas only. No contact with outsiders unless authorized. No caffeine, alcohol, or unregulated medication. Your vitals will be tracked. You'll meet with the physician daily. And if I break your precious rules..." His tone didn't shift. "You won't. You're unbelievable." "I'm careful," he replied. "This isn't just a pregnancy. It's an heir." She stood abruptly. "You talk about this child like it's a stock portfolio." His gaze didn't soften. "Because when my name is attached to something, I protect it with everything I have. And what about protecting me?" There was a flicker, just 1 second, where his jaw tensed and his eyes darkened. Then it was gone. "You'll be fine as long as you follow the protocol," he said. Sienna pushed her plate away. "You're treating me like a lab project." Cassian stood, walked to the doors, paused. "I'm treating you like the only person in the world who's carrying something that can't be replaced." And then he left, leaving her alone with silence, eggs gone cold, and a truth she didn't want to accept. She wasn't part of his life. She was part of his plan. Dinner came with more rules. Be prompt, be dressed, be present. No security guards this time, just the long hallway to the private dining wing and the scent of roasted vegetables and lemon-scented polish in the air. Sienna arrived on time. She wore a cream-colored dress from the closet, simple, soft, modest. The only thing she owned now was her voice, and tonight she was determined to use it. Cassian was already seated when she entered. Dark blazer, open collar, a man carved from stone and silence. He gestured to the seat opposite him. "Sit." She didn't move. "You know what's funny?" He waited. "I used to imagine this. Us, dinner together. Something quiet, something real." He didn't respond. She sat anyway. The meal was exquisite. Artichoke risotto, wild salmon, a side of silence. Cassian cut his food with surgical precision. "You're not eating." "I'm not hungry. You need to maintain a schedule." She scoffed. "I didn't come here to play house with a man who locked me in." You agreed to this. No. I agreed to save Layla. You agreed to carry my child in safety. This is the safest place in the country. She leaned forward, her voice ice. You keep saying my child like I don't matter, like I'm some storage unit. He met her eyes. That child is my future. That child is my name. And that means I will not gamble with either. I'm not a gamble. I'm a woman, a person, and I deserve to be treated like one. He didn't blink. Instead, he said, eat. Sienna clenched her jaw, picked up her fork, and forced a bite past her lips. Not because she obeyed him, but because of the life growing inside her, a life he saw as a possession, and one she was determined to protect on her own terms, even if it meant surviving him first. 3 weeks passed. They spoke only when necessary, clinical words, scheduled check-ins, nothing human, until the heat wave. The estate's advanced climate system failed without warning. By evening, the glass and stone mansion had turned into a greenhouse. Sienna kicked off her slippers, peeled away her cardigan, and lay still on the cool tiles of her bathroom floor. But the baby stirred. The pressure made her nauseous. The air felt too thick to breathe. She wandered into the hallway barefoot, moving like a ghost through the dim corridors. And that's when she saw him. Cassian, in the kitchen, shirtless, standing in front of the wide-open freezer, hair damp at the edges, chest slick with sweat. He looked up, frozen in place. You're awake, he said. So are you, she replied. He stepped aside. Cold air helps. She approached, wary but too exhausted to care. The freezer blasted cool relief across her flushed skin. I can't sleep, she muttered. Neither can I. The silence between them was different tonight. Not charged, not bitter, just still. I can feel her, she whispered, resting her hand against her swollen belly. She kicked earlier, just once. He hesitated. May I? Her heart caught. Then, slowly, she nodded. He reached out. His palm met her skin. And everything stopped. Not the temperature, not the tension, but the distance. He wasn't the CEO now. Not the ex. Not the threat. Just a man feeling his daughter move for the first time. His fingers stayed there, unmoving, as his eyes softened with something unspoken. Then, as quickly as he'd touched her, he stepped back. I shouldn't, he said, voice rough. Why not? He looked away. Because if I start, I won't stop. Her voice dropped. Then don't stop. The space between them vanished in a breath. Cassian's hands framed her face, and for a moment, just one, he hesitated. Then their mouths collided. It wasn't soft. It wasn't slow. It was years of silence, rage, longing, and betrayal crashing together in a kiss that stole the air from both their lungs. Sienna gasped against his mouth. He groaned against her skin. Her back hit the counter, cool granite against burning flesh, and his hands gripped her hips like he was anchoring himself in a world that no longer made sense. She tasted like defiance. He kissed like he was drowning. This is wrong, she breathed. I know. He kissed her again. You're a tyrant, she whispered against his jaw. I know. His lips traveled down her throat, teeth grazing, breath harsh. Tell me to stop, he growled. She didn't. Instead, she pulled him closer. They didn't make it to the bedroom. The kitchen became their battleground, marble island, sweat-slick skin, every kiss a contradiction. He lifted her with ease, set her down on the counter, and worshipped every inch of her with reverence that contradicted everything he'd said before. He wasn't careful. He was desperate. She wasn't afraid. She was alive. When he finally entered her, it was slow, deep, devastating. She cried out his name, nails digging into his back. His forehead pressed against hers. I hate how much I missed you. Her lips trembled. Then don't leave again. I won't. Their rhythm was frantic at first, then softened, like they were trying to remember how to breathe the same air again. Every moan, every gasp, every broken whisper rewrote the rules between them. By the time it ended, she lay in his arms on the cold kitchen floor, heartbeats steady against his. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel owned. She felt seen. After the kitchen, everything changed. The walls didn't fall. The guards didn't vanish. The rules didn't fade. But the way he looked at her did. It wasn't calculation anymore. It was heat, restraint, hunger. The next night, she passed him in the hallway. No words. Just a look. And that was enough. They didn't make it to her room. This time, it was the library. Books watched from every corner as he pinned her against the shelves, mouth hot and unforgiving. "You drive me insane," he muttered against her collarbone. Good. They didn't speak of emotions. Not yet. Only of touch. He tore through the thin straps of her slip like paper, bearing her slowly, savoring her. And when he made love to her, again and again, it wasn't about control. It was surrender. She whispered his name like a vow. He held her like something fragile. They fell asleep tangled on the rug, surrounded by forgotten novels and unsaid apologies. It kept happening. The rooftop under moonlight, the indoor pool, water glistening across her skin as he lifted her into his arms. His office desk, papers scattered as he kissed her senseless. With each encounter, something deeper stirred. Not just lust, something unspoken. She saw it in the way he touched her belly now, gently, like he was protecting something precious. He saw it in her eyes, when she stopped flinching every time he walked into a room. They never talked about what it meant, but in those moments, they remembered who they used to be. Not enemies, not property, just two people who once loved each other, and maybe still did. And for the first time in years, Sienna allowed herself to hope. Maybe this could work. Maybe this time, it would be different. Maybe Cassian Larkin wasn't lost after all. It began with a whisper. She stood in the doorway of his bedroom, barefoot in a silk robe that barely reached her thighs, moonlight spilling across her skin. "You didn't come to dinner," she said. Cassian looked up from the edge of the bed, unshaven, eyes dark with something unspoken. "I didn't want to pretend tonight." "Neither do I." She crossed the room slowly, each step deliberate, the air between them heavy with everything they hadn't said since that night in the kitchen. When she reached him, she didn't ask for permission. She slid her hands up his chest and pressed her lips to his. This time, it was tender, intentional. He stood, lifting her as if she weighed nothing, and laid her down on the bed with reverence he'd never shown before. The bedroom was dim. No words, no orders, no sharp edges, just breath and bare skin. He undressed her slowly, fingers brushing over her curves like they were learning her all over again, as though every part of her deserved to be remembered. Her robe slipped away. He kissed her collarbone, her belly, the curve of her hips, softly, carefully, like she might break if he rushed. "You're beautiful," he whispered against her skin. "You always were." His voice trembled slightly, almost afraid. She reached up and pulled him down to her. "I don't want power games tonight," she whispered. "You won't get one." When he entered her, it wasn't with urgency. It was slow, deep, measured. His hands cradled her face. His mouth never left hers. They moved in rhythm, not rush. Her legs wrapped around his waist, back arching as he kissed away every memory of cruelty. And when she cried out, it wasn't from pain. It was release. She'd been holding her breath for years. Tonight, she exhaled. The next morning, she woke to the scent of him on the sheets and the quiet weight of his arm draped across her waist. Cassian Larkin, cold, ruthless, untouchable, slept with his face pressed into her shoulder, like a man who finally found a home. She lay still, memorizing the moment. No threats, no terms, no silence, just warmth. He stirred, blinking slowly, and met her gaze without the usual armor in his eyes. "Morning," he said, voice low. "Morning," she replied. They didn't rush to dress, didn't pretend nothing happened. There were no walls left between them to rebuild. Over breakfast, he served her himself. French toast, strawberries, tea with just the right amount of honey. "You remembered," she said, smiling faintly. "I remember everything," he answered without looking up. And over the following days, something shifted. He began canceling meetings just to sit with her during her appointments. He ordered furniture catalogs so they could choose a crib together. They argued over baby names. She liked Aria, he liked something old and strong like Evelyn. "You want her to sound like a dynasty," she teased. "And you want her to sound like a violin," he replied. They laughed. They touched. They kissed when no one was looking. He opened a door for her one afternoon, hand resting gently on the small of her back, and she looked at him like she used to. With hope. In the evenings, they curled up in the den watching old movies. He read to her when her back ached. She massaged his temples when he couldn't sleep. They made love like it was a promise. In every room, every space, every breath. His office, against the library shelves, beneath the stars on the terrace, and for the first time in years, Sienna wasn't surviving. She was glowing. The house felt different now, warmer. There was music in the mornings, soft jazz that spilled through the halls. The staff smiled more. Even the security detail seemed less stiff. Sienna moved through the estate with ease, no longer under surveillance but under watchful care. And Cassian? He was changing. The man who once demanded silence now listened when she spoke. He asked about her dreams, her childhood, the way she used to sneak into her dad's office just to spin in his leather chair and feel important. He didn't speak about business anymore, or control, or legacy. He spoke about colors for the nursery, wooden mobiles, how he wanted to learn how to braid hair, just in case she gets mine. Sienna laughed when he said that. You're going to be the most intimidating girl dad in New York. Good, he smirked. No one's touching her until she's 30. They were building something real. One night, as they lay in bed, her head on his chest, his fingers stroking lazy circles over her stomach, he whispered, I never stopped loving you. She blinked up at him. Then why did you leave? He swallowed. Because I thought power would protect me from pain, and wanting a family made me feel vulnerable. She didn't answer right away. Then, I didn't want your empire. I just wanted you. I know, he said softly. And I'm sorry it took me this long to understand. She kissed his chest, closed her eyes. It was perfect. Too perfect. Because just beneath the quiet happiness, a storm was waiting. And the universe has a cruel way of reminding you, nothing gold stays untouched for long. Hello, beautiful family. If this story makes you feel in a certain way, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you miss what happens next. It started as a cramp. Sienna was in the garden, barefoot on the grass, tending to a row of hydrangeas Cassian had imported just for her. The sun was warm, the breeze soft. Then the pain struck, sharp, deep, immediate. She gasped, clutching her side. The next wave hit harder. Her knees buckled. Sienna, a voice shouted from the terrace. She looked down. Her dress, pale yellow, was soaked in red. Cassian reached her first. He dropped to his knees, his arms catching her just as she collapsed. Hey, I've got you. Stay with me. She couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Only one word pushed through her lips. Baby, I'm calling the chopper, he barked to his head of security. Now. The ride to the hospital was a blur of flashing lights, clipped voices, and pain that felt like fire tearing through her. Sienna gripped his hand with what strength she had left. Save her. Please save her. Cassian's jaw was tight, his face pale. I swear to you, I'll get her out safe. She passed out before they reached the emergency entrance. When she woke, the ceiling was white. The air smelled of antiseptic and sorrow. Cassian was there. His hands were shaking. She knew before he spoke. No, she whispered. He nodded, eyes wet. I'm sorry. She turned her head and screamed. Not words, not sentences, just sound, raw, jagged sound. A nurse ran in. Cassian didn't move. He sat beside her, let her scream into the sterile walls of that room, and never once looked away. Until she stopped. Until her voice was gone. Until there was nothing left but silence. The room was too quiet. Even the machines seemed to mute themselves, as if out of respect for what had been taken. Sienna sat in the hospital bed, knees drawn to her chest, an IV drip in her arm and a band around her wrist that now felt like a shackle. She stared at the wall, not crying, not speaking, just breathing, barely. Cassian stood near the window, his suit wrinkled, hair disheveled, eyes dark from sleeplessness. He hadn't left. Hadn't said much, either. She finally spoke. I felt her, she whispered. Cassian turned. I know. She kicked the night before, just once, like she was saying hi. He didn't answer. I should have noticed something was wrong. I should have... Don't do that, he interrupted. Don't blame yourself. She looked at him. Who else is there to blame? He crossed the room slowly, sat on the edge of her bed. I didn't want this, she said, voice cracking. Not like this, not under your roof, not with rules and contracts and tension in every breath. But I still wanted her. I still loved her. I did too. She scoffed. No, Cassian, you wanted control, a legacy. You never wanted her. Not the way I did. I changed. Not enough. He looked down. I'm sorry. She shook her head. You should be. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, she asked, do you want to hold her? His face went blank. What? They said I could. If I wanted. Before they took her. Just for a minute. Cassian looked away. And that silence said everything. She nodded, blinking back the last of her tears. You never wanted this baby, she said. He didn't argue. Because she was right. They discharged her the next afternoon. No balloons. No flowers. Just a silent escort and a hollow womb. The estate, once filled with warmth and whispered promises, now felt like a museum of what could have been. Sienna stood in the nursery, unfinished, untouched. A pale crib, a mobile still in its box. The room smelled like cedar and sorrow. Cassian watched from the doorway. She didn't turn around. She was never going to be safe here, she said quietly. He didn't argue. You said you changed, she continued, but you still couldn't say her name. Cassian exhaled through his nose, hands in his pockets. I didn't know how. That's the problem, she whispered. You know how to command armies, flip markets, control everything. But you didn't know how to hold your own child. That's not fair. No? She turned now. I begged you to hold her, just once. And you looked at me like I was offering you poison. His throat bobbed. I was afraid. Of her. Of myself. That stopped her. She searched his face. What do you mean? I was afraid that if I held her, I'd finally feel it. Love, guilt, everything. And I didn't know if I could survive it. She blinked. Then you shouldn't have made me carry it alone. Silence. You grieved in silence, he said finally. I grieved in shame, and yet here we are, she said softly, both broken, but only one of us bleeding. Cassian stepped into the room. She stepped out. I need space, she said. I'll give it to you. And time. You'll have it. She paused at the door, then looked back at him one last time. She deserved more than this, she whispered. Then she left. And this time, he didn't follow. 3 weeks later, the doorbell rang. Sienna was in the conservatory, attempting to read, though her eyes hadn't touched a page in days. The house still smelled like antiseptic and grief. She wasn't expecting anyone. When the butler didn't announce a name, she grew uneasy. Then came the knock at the parlor doors. She rose slowly and opened it. Standing there, flawless, tall, dressed in designer silk, was a woman from Cassian's past. Celeste, his former fiancée. Sienna's stomach turned. Celeste offered a smile so sharp it nearly sliced the air. I hope I'm not intruding. You are. Still direct, Celeste mused, stepping inside without invitation. Some things never change. Sienna blocked her path. What do you want? Celeste glanced around the room, admiring the details, the furnishings, the silence. I came to deliver a message, she said, placing her manicured hand on her stomach. We're expecting. Sienna blinked. What? Cassian and I. It happened the same week you lost yours. Life's funny, isn't it? The words landed like bullets. Sienna tried to breathe, but the air wouldn't move. You're lying. Celeste pulled out a medical folder from her handbag. Ultrasound images. Signed paperwork. Dates that aligned too perfectly. He told me you'd left, Celeste said, voice dripping sugar. That you were a chapter closed. I assumed it was safe. When? Sienna asked, her voice like steel. The night of the shareholder gala, Celeste said casually. You were probably already asleep. Sienna's body went numb. She remembered that night. Cassian came home late, distant, said he was tired, kissed her forehead, not her mouth. And now this? You were carrying his child, Sienna whispered. And he slept with you? Celeste tilted her head. He said it was a mistake. Sienna stepped back. No, she corrected herself aloud. I was the mistake. Sienna didn't wait for Cassian to come home. She waited for the sound of his car, the quiet click of the door, the subtle shift in the air when he entered the estate. Then she met him in the hallway. No words. Just her standing there, still, pale, shaking. He stopped. Sienna? You got her pregnant, she said. His body stiffened. Who told you? Celeste. She came here, smiling, gloating. It wasn't like that. She cut him off. You said you loved me. I do. You said this time was different. It was. Her voice cracked. Then how could you go back to her? I didn't go back, he said quickly. It was one night, after the gala, before we found each other again. One night, she repeated, as if tasting the words, while I was asleep, carrying your child. He took a step toward her. She stepped back. You told me I was the only one who mattered, she whispered. That everything had changed, that we were building something. We were. No, she said, eyes glassy. I was building. You were distracting yourself. I made a mistake. She shook her head. You made a choice. He closed his eyes for a long moment. I didn't think you'd find out. That made her laugh. Just once. Bitter. Right. Because hiding the truth has worked out so well for us. Sienna. She raised a hand. Don't. I carried your child while you threatened me. I gave you a second chance after everything. And now you've made me into a footnote again. You're not. I was just the incubator, wasn't I? She said softly. A walking womb with no voice. His face crumbled. It's more than that now. You know it is. But not enough, she whispered. And then she turned and walked away. Again, Sienna packed light. Not because she didn't have things, she did. Designer clothes, custom skincare, shoes still in boxes. But none of it mattered. Not anymore. She folded a few maternity dresses into a duffel bag. Picked up the only item that still meant something. Her ultrasound photo, slightly worn at the corners. The one with 2 heartbeats. She ran her thumb over it. One gone. One still fighting. Cassian didn't come after her at first. Not until she stepped out the front door, bag on her shoulder, keys in her hand. Then he was there. You don't have to do this, he said. She looked at him. You made your choice, she replied. Now I'm making mine. Where will you go? I don't know. Somewhere that isn't controlled by your security team. Somewhere I can breathe. His jaw tightened. You're still pregnant. I'm aware. You need medical care. Protection. I need peace. He took a shaky breath. Let me at least send someone with you. No, she said. You don't get to track me anymore. I'm sorry. She smiled. A sad, soft thing. You've said that a lot lately, and maybe you mean it, but I can't survive on apologies. He stepped closer. Please don't go like this. There's no other way. Cassian stared at her, like if he looked hard enough, he could will her to stay. But he didn't stop her. Not when she got into the car. Not when the engine started. Not when she drove down the long, winding road and disappeared beyond the gates. Only then did he sit down on the steps of his own mansion. And for the first time since he was a boy, Cassian Lorcan cried. Because some things can't be fixed. And some people don't come back. Sienna made it as far as the train station before her body gave out. It started with a wave of dizziness, then nausea, then the world tilting sideways. She barely made it onto the bench before her vision went black. When she woke, everything was white again, but not the sterile white of grief. This room was warmer, brighter, a single potted plant on the window ledge, a fleece blanket over her legs, and a man seated beside her, tall, dark-haired, calm eyes beneath tired lids, tattoos curling up his forearms beneath rolled sleeves. You're awake, he said gently. Her voice was dry. Where am I? St. Mercy General. You fainted. They brought you in by ambulance. She blinked. The baby? He smiled, soft and reassuring. Still strong. They ran full scans. Vitals look good. You're dehydrated and underfed, but the baby's hanging in. She exhaled, tears slipping free without effort. Thank God. I'm Dr. Thorne, he said. Nico. Trauma surgery's my specialty, but I was covering for a colleague in OB when you came in. She studied him. You're calm. Comes with the job. She paused. Why are you still here? I signed myself as your temporary emergency contact. You had no one listed, and I didn't want you waking up alone. That broke something inside her. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded. Do you want me to call someone? Family? Partner? She looked away. There's no one. He didn't push. Instead, he stood, refilled her water, and handed it to her like it was the most natural thing in the world. You don't have to explain, he said. But if you want to talk, I'm here. And she believed him, because for the first time in a very long while, someone didn't want anything from her. Except maybe to help. Sienna was discharged 2 days later. Nico was waiting by the door when she stepped into the hallway, bag in hand, eyes still hollow from everything she'd left behind. You have a place to go? He asked. She hesitated. I'll figure it out. You shouldn't be figuring anything out while 7 months pregnant and barely healed. She gave him a tired smile. You don't even know me. I know you passed out at a train station alone, he said calmly. And I know you're trying to hold yourself together with duct tape and willpower. She blinked at him. I'm not offering a rescue, he added. Just a pause, a place to breathe. She narrowed her eyes slightly. Why would you do that? Because I've seen women like you walk back into the fire they just escaped, just because it feels familiar. His words struck something deep inside her. And then came the part that made her stomach turn with irony. I used to know someone who would have done this to a woman, he said. A man I was once close to. Until I realized what he was willing to sacrifice for power. Sienna stared at him. What was his name? He hesitated. Cassian Lorcan. The room tilted. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. You were his friend? She asked, voice sharp. Once, not anymore. Why not? Because I saw the way he treated people when they stopped serving his plans. She didn't respond. Couldn't. Nico tilted his head. Why, you know him? She looked down. More than I ever wanted to. For a moment, the silence between them buzzed with shared understanding. Then he stepped forward. Come with me. I have a spare room, private, safe. You don't owe me anything. She studied him. The steadiness, the sincerity, and for once, her instinct didn't scream run. It whispered trust. Okay, she said, and followed him out the door. Nico's place was nothing like Cassian's estate. No marble floors, no motion sensors, no whispered conversations through earpieces. Just a third-floor walk-up in a quiet Chicago neighborhood. Wooden floors, books stacked sideways on mismatched shelves, a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon and fresh coffee. Sienna sat on the worn leather couch and felt something she hadn't in months. Peace. Nico didn't hover. He handed her a blanket and let her rest. He cooked without asking her preferences, and somehow, everything tasted exactly right. The first night, he offered the guest room. She accepted. The second night, he left the door to his own room cracked, just in case. By the end of the first week, she was sleeping through the night again. One afternoon, she found him in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, humming to himself while chopping vegetables. You don't ask questions, she said. He glanced over, only when someone's ready to answer them. I wasn't supposed to get pregnant, she whispered. Not like that, not with him. I went to a clinic, and it all went wrong. Nico didn't flinch. Go on. I didn't want his name. I didn't want his empire. I just wanted someone to love. And now? I still want that, she said, but without strings, without fear. He set the knife down, then turned to her, serious but gentle. Then stay. She blinked. What? Stay here. Not because you're broken, not because you need saving, but because you deserve stillness, safety, a new chapter. Her throat tightened. Why would you do this? Because I see you, he said. Not the headlines, not the complications, just you. And you deserve to be loved without condition. Sienna didn't answer. She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around him, and finally allowed herself to fall, not into danger, but into someone who would never make her beg to be seen. Time didn't heal everything, but it helped her rebuild. Sienna stayed with Nico. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. And when her daughter arrived, screaming, perfect, alive, Nico was there, holding her hand, forehead pressed to hers as she cried through the pain. She's here, he whispered. Sienna looked at the tiny face tucked against her chest and felt something snap into place. Aria. She had chosen the name long before Cassian ever touched her again. Nico never questioned it. He just whispered it like a prayer. They brought Aria home to a nursery Nico painted himself. Yellow walls, a ceiling covered in hand-drawn stars, a crib built by his own hands. There were no staff, no cameras, no locked wings, just family. Sienna spent late nights rocking Aria back to sleep, while Nico read medical journals by the hallway light, keeping one ear open in case either of them needed him. When Arya had her first fever, Nico stayed up all night cooling her forehead, checking her temperature every hour. When she took her first step, it was toward Nico's outstretched arms. By the time she turned 3, she was calling him Daddy, and it didn't feel forced. It felt right. Sienna never spoke of Cassian. Nico never asked. They built their life in quiet, steady layers. Mornings at the farmer's market, Saturday pancakes, afternoons at the park. Arya loved trains. Nico built her one from scratch in the backyard. She loved violins too. Sienna enrolled her in lessons, and Nico clapped the loudest at her first recital, even when she hit every wrong note. It wasn't the life Sienna imagined. It was better, because it was real. And it was hers. Love didn't return in a thunderstorm. It came slowly, in the quiet, in the way Nico refilled her tea without asking, in the way he brushed Arya's hair with surprising gentleness, in the way he always knocked, always asked, never demanded. Sienna had built walls, not out of spite, but survival. Nico never tried to climb over them. He waited at the gate. One morning, Arya spilled juice across the rug and burst into tears. Sienna rushed over, but Nico got there first. He knelt, wiped her cheeks, and said, "It's just a rug, baby. You're what matters." Sienna watched them from the hallway, heart swelling with something fragile and terrifying. Later that night, she sat beside him on the couch while Arya slept down the hall. "You're not afraid?" she asked quietly. "Of what?" "Of me leaving." He looked at her. "Do you want to leave?" She shook her head. "No, then I'm not afraid." Her lips curved. "That simple?" "Love's supposed to be simple," he said. "It's life that complicates it." She leaned against him. "I used to think love had to hurt to be real. That wasn't love. That was control. I'm still learning the difference." "You're doing just fine," he whispered. Then came the moment she never thought would come again. "Marry me." She looked up, startled. He wasn't on one knee. He wasn't holding a ring. Just looking at her, open, steady, sure. "I don't need a ceremony to love you," he continued. "But I'd like to give you a name that means safety, stability, choice." She covered her mouth, emotion rising. And then she nodded, not because she was swept up in passion, but because after everything she'd been through, this was the first time she knew it was real. They didn't need a cathedral. Sienna chose a vineyard just outside Chicago, rows of grapes, soft breeze, and a view of Lake Michigan stretching beyond the hills. The ceremony was small. Close friends, a few of Nico's colleagues. Layla, now free and thriving, stood by Sienna's side in soft blue. Arya carried a basket of petals and forgot to drop them, too busy smiling at the crowd. Sienna's dress wasn't grand. Ivory satin, simple and elegant. No veil, no train, just truth. Nico stood at the altar in a navy suit, looking like the safest place in the world. As the music began and Sienna took her first step down the aisle, time slowed. She saw the life she used to want, and the life she had now. She saw love, not built on ownership or apologies, but on respect. And then she saw him, far off, near the tree line. Cassian. He didn't speak. He didn't move. Just stood there, hands shaking, eyes fixed on her, like he was watching a dream he once held, but never truly earned. The officiant reached the question, "If anyone objects to this union, speak now." The world paused. Sienna met Cassian's eyes. A lifetime passed between them in a single look. He didn't say a word, because he knew. She had been his once, but Nico had chosen her every day since. And that was what love was, not claiming, choosing. Cassian lowered his head and stepped back into the shadows. After the vows, after the kiss, after the cheers and confetti and quiet joy, Sienna slipped a small envelope to a nearby guest. "Make sure he gets this." Inside was a photo. Arya, grinning, holding a toy violin, and a note in Sienna's handwriting. "She has your eyes." But Nico taught her how to love. Cassian stood at the edge of the vineyard, long after the music faded. He hadn't planned to come, hadn't planned to see her again. But when the invitation accidentally reached his assistant, forwarded from a florist's email, he couldn't ignore it. It wasn't an invitation addressed to him. It wasn't meant to be. But still, he came, dressed in black, alone, hidden by the trees. He watched the woman he once claimed walk toward a man who never tried to own her. He watched Arya, his blood, his daughter, scatter flower petals down the aisle without fear. And he watched the only real thing he ever wanted slip into someone else's hands, not stolen, chosen. When the ceremony ended and the guests dispersed toward the reception tent, he turned to leave. He made it halfway down the gravel road when a guest caught up with him. "Miss Vale said to give you this." The man handed him a small envelope, then disappeared. Cassian stood in silence, fingers trembling as he opened it. Inside was a photo. A little girl, beaming, dark curls bouncing as she held a toy violin nearly her size. She had his eyes, but the note beneath it undid him. "She has your eyes, but Nico taught her how to love." Cassian closed his eyes. The wind shifted, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel powerful. He felt human. He folded the photo carefully, slipped it into his pocket like something sacred, then walked away, not out of bitterness, not out of defeat, but because some love stories aren't meant to be reclaimed. Some are meant to be released. And finally, he let her go. Years passed. Arya grew with a violin in her hands and laughter in her lungs. She loved puzzles, hated broccoli, and once told Nico he was her forever daddy. Sienna never corrected her, not because it wasn't true, but because it was the truest thing Arya had ever said. Nico was there for every scraped knee, every science fair, every bedtime story. He coached her through her first school recital, even when her bow screeched across the strings. He never missed a single moment. Cassian never reappeared. But once a year, on Arya's birthday, a plain white envelope would arrive. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a gift. A rare music box from Europe, a sketch of the Chicago skyline drawn by hand. A violin carved from rare maple, inscribed with her initials. Arya once asked, "Who keeps sending these?" Sienna smiled gently. "Someone who thinks you're special." "But how do they know what I like?" Sienna paused. "Because they knew a part of you before you were born." Arya accepted the answer with the grace only children have, curious but not obsessed. She placed the gifts on a shelf in her room, treated them like treasures from a kind stranger, and never asked again. Nico never questioned it either, not because he didn't wonder, but because he understood what mattered most, being the man who stayed, who showed up, who chose her every day. One afternoon, as the three of them sat watching the lake from their porch, Arya climbed onto Nico's lap and rested her head on his chest. "I'm glad you're my dad," she said softly. He kissed the top of her head. "I'm the lucky one." "And Sienna?" She didn't cry, she just smiled. Because some stories don't need dramatic endings, just a quiet truth. Love is not who gave you life, it's who gives you theirs. By the time Arya turned 10, she had 2 violins, 1 piano, and a bookshelf lined with music theory books far beyond her grade level. She also had 2 fathers, only one of them she knew. Nico taught her how to read sheet music, how to change a tire, how to tie a ponytail tight enough to hold through a full school day. He was there at every recital, filming with shaky hands and cheering louder than anyone else. He made her lunch with notes tucked inside, play with heart. "You've already won. I love you. Always." The other father remained a shadow, but the letters kept coming. Every birthday a box appeared, wrapped in cream paper, sealed in wax, never mailed, always hand-delivered to their porch by someone who never knocked. Inside, not just gifts, but heirlooms, first-edition books, a rare vintage metronome, original sheet music signed by composers long gone. No name, no note, just presence from afar. Arya never asked again. Maybe she sensed the truth. Maybe she didn't care, because love wasn't measured in DNA or last names. It was in footsteps running down the hallway, in arms that lifted her when she fell, in hands that clapped for her even when she missed a note. Sienna sometimes found herself standing by the window when those birthday boxes arrived. She never opened them, but she never stopped feeling the weight of what they meant. Cassian never asked for contact, never filed for rights, never tried to disrupt the family they'd built without him. He had power, but he no longer had control. And that, perhaps, was his truest form of love, letting go. Nico and Sienna eventually told Arya the truth, gently, with time. They told her she was born from strength, not mistake, that she was loved before she ever took her first breath, by more than one man, And Arya, with the grace only a child can offer, simply said, "Okay." No drama, no identity crisis, just understanding. Because in her heart she already knew Nico was the man who brushed her hair before school, the one who taught her how to swim, who stayed up late helping with science projects and drove 4 hours for a violin competition in the snow. And Cassian? He was a name she didn't carry, but a kindness she didn't question. Each year, when that white box appeared, she smiled, because love didn't have to be loud. Sometimes it just had to show up, even from a distance. On her 18th birthday, the box contained something different. A letter, just 1 page, handwritten. She read it silently, lips pressed together, eyes misty, then folded it carefully and tucked it into her journal. She didn't tell anyone what it said. But that night, as she sat between Nico and Sienna watching the stars, she whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." And Nico kissed her temple. Sienna held her hand. Because in the end, this wasn't a story about loss or legacy. It was about love, the kind you fight for, the kind you grow into, the kind you build every single day. If this story moved you, if you believe that real family is chosen, not assigned, then hit the like button so more people can find this message. Drop a comment below, love us a choice. And if you're new to Love and Twilights, don't forget to subscribe for more stories just like this one. Until next time, choose love. Always.